sit up here now, that would be great. Um, the conversation, I wanted to try to summarize, but we talked about sort of the whole universe and what is astronomy, who are we teaching? We have all these different audiences. The one thing that struck me, oh, by the way, I should introduce myself. I forgot about that part. I'm Rachel Freed. I'm a postdoc with Dan at UNC Chapel Hill, and I study engagement, sort of. What are the impacts of our students in astronomy classes using telescopes and doing research projects, and how is this impacting them in their futures? So that's me, and in a second, we will introduce the panelists or have them introduce themselves. But I just wanted to sort of say, we covered so much, but the thing that struck me yesterday was how diverse our audiences are and our approaches are and our ideas are about what we're supposed to be doing. And it's not a bad thing, but it's interesting trying to come to consensus on some of these questions when we have such different ideas or understandings of what our different audiences need and what we're trying to accomplish. So that was, but it was really inspiring to hear all the conversations. So let me have my panelists introduce themselves quickly here.
Hi, I'm David General. I'm from Perimeter College, which is the two-year unit of Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Stone-Woolbrick, Interim Director of Education and Public Engagement at AUI. It's a nonprofit that manages science facilities, largely radio astronomy. I also am on the OPUS research team, our place in space, the curriculum that utilizes Skynet. We're studying the impacts of that on undergraduate students.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Wooten. I am from the University of Alabama at Birmingham.
Right, thank you. Okay, so I think we're ready to just jump right in. So our first question, and these are my panelists. Thank you guys for being here. And I know this kind of came up, we addressed a lot of these questions in our discussions yesterday, but can astronomy be used to improve scientific literacy in the STEM workforce? And I've been thinking about, we talked about this a bit, but my question is really, how do we do this? We hear this all the time, and we all are trying to do it, but specifically, how are we going to do this? And so I want to get input on how astronomy can be used to improve scientific literacy in the STEM workforce. So I'm going to ask the panelists for a moment.
So I think the answer is yes. I'm kidding. Okay, so I've had some experience with this. I've had the pleasure of taking students on study abroad trips. We've gone to Chile, we've gone to Alma. I've had a pure mathematics major who has experienced an existential crisis of, what does my work mean? He met an engineer. The engineer told him he uses mathematics to solve problems. That student became an engineer. In astronomy, I've had several engineering students who took astronomy they didn't have to, they just were interested in astronomy. And they turned from civil or electrical engineers into aerospace engineers. So yeah, we can definitely use astronomy to improve scientific literacy and the STEM workforce. These people are now focused. They now know what they want to do. They have a vision, they have a path. So astronomy is the basis of all scientific inquiry. It's a result of our curiosity about our place in the universe, our origin, why we're here. It's multidiscipline. Okay, so in the STEM workforce, it's good for people to realize that as astronomy is multidiscipline, these barriers, these boundaries we have between disciplines are just a construct. They're all studying the same thing. So, and I think that's an important focus in the STEM workforce. And also, when people are engaged in astronomy, they tend to become lifelong learners. Astronomy changes so quickly. There's so much more information every day. So they tend to follow it, keep up with it.
I will echo a few of David's points. Yes, astronomy can be used to improve STEM literacy. We talk about it a lot as a motivator. I would actually be interested to see some of the research around that. But we have anecdotally, as educators in astronomy, seen this. I spent many years in a planetarium, and I'll never get tired of hearing a child gasp at the stars when you pull down the light pollution. And astronomy is a great connector. It connects us. It connects us to ourselves, to our culture, to each other across national boundaries. And so all of these are strengths that can be used to motivate a student to engage in science and to promote their identity in science.
I'm going to talk about improving the STEM workforce and whether astronomy can be a part of that. When I think about astronomy's role, I think about who, who is in the workforce and how we can benefit different kind of players in the workforce in STEM right now. So have you looked at recently, like the American Institute of Physics, an analysis of men versus women graduating in STEM disciplines? Biology seems to have men and women graduation rates at like 50%. But for physics and astronomy, we're still lagging behind for both getting women to be of equity in graduation rates and also for persons of color. So we have a lot of work to do. So I would caveat that yes, astronomy can be used to improve the STEM workforce if we do a few things. And if you just give me a moment, I'll share some things that have really stood out to me in the literature recently. Can you raise your hand if you've read the book Talking About Leaving by Jane Seymour? It's a really cool book about why students leave STEM in their undergraduate learning. And so I'm just going to mention a few things. I know we've talked about a lot of these yesterday, but content overload, incoherent presentation, curved grading, material that's too high and inappropriately abstract. They focus on boring delivery. So we want to work towards more inclusive pedagogy. And I just want to encourage people to not only read that text, but focus on things like the American Institute of Physics Team Up project, which gave a really great set of 5 things that departments can do. So maybe you're the only astronomy teacher in a physics department, but maybe it's not just your course, but also your department and your institutional culture that could have an impact on students, improving STEM generally through astronomy. So the Team Up report by AIP has some 5 things that departments can do to support improving STEM. Yeah, STEM education.
Thank you. So we're going to jump into everyone discussing in a moment, and I'll say for the rest of the questions, the panel and I will be sort of, instead of giving you our take on it at first, we're going to be joining you and roaming around. So it'll be a slightly different part of the change from yesterday. So let's take 5 minutes to talk to the people at your table about this question.
What is the question? Come on over here. It's for you to improve scientific literacy. Yeah, come on. More the merrier. We're a big old pod here. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
Okay, so can astronomy
probably would elicit more responses. But I certainly, what Michelle was talking here about, covering those narratives of folks that have been kind of like left behind in the entire process. I think it's important to kind of like be able to go and address some of the things that come out of this. And some of these things, of course, are systemic.
Yeah. A lot of those things are systemic. I was thinking that astronomy can be a jumping off point where you say, okay, I can do this accessible bit of STEM, and perhaps I can branch out and do more.
We don't necessarily think about how we
Increase
can
interdisciplinary
encourage
science.
them to something that
Because
maybe is
astronomy has some,
alongside
I'm not going to say astronomy is
traditional
easy,
science.
but it's accessible in a lot of
But maybe we
ways,
can help them see
if
that
that
science
makes
is a
sense.
big
Sorry, it's very early in the morning, and I'm understanding astronomy doesn't just, yeah.
But at some point, you have to understand. And yeah, you don't want to
Yeah, I had a STEM major in astronomy club. I did my like general science credit, and I love that too. I was that chemistry, acknowledging like astronomy. I loved like my survey astronomy thing, and like it like in my STEM major, like it was the science that got me over the line to actually get into yeah.
what I think is important to understand is that astronomy is now extremely broad.
So like that, like
You
I
have
like
astrochemistry, you have astrobiology, you have astrogeology. Okay, it's encompassing a lot of sciences. Okay, and so because of that uniqueness, I think it is a unique area that can uh, make can allow people to jump into other fields. Let me give an example. I was at an astrobiology conference in England in April, okay, and I was shocked. There was a psychologist who gave a talk. There was somebody who gave a talk on on how animals communicate with each other. And why? Because when we find intelligent extraterrestrial life, we need to know how to communicate with them. So psychology may be very important. How animals communicate may help us understand how to communicate with intelligent beings on other planets. So astrobiology is encompassing a whole lot of stuff. Okay, it also encompasses law. Okay, space law. Okay, there's so much that astronomy is now touching. So we're unique.
Yeah, there's a really neat series that NASA is putting out called Surprisingly STEM. And I use it a lot. I have a mobile planetarium, and I can't do further than projection yet because I'm piecing it all together as I get funding. But the Suddenly STEM series is really nice because it shows like a plant biologist and a marine ecologist and like diving specialists and how they have all
30
have
seconds to summarize your single table.
give to the space program. It's not just a bunch of abstracts. It's showing us.
Well, this is Station.
I think
She's a chemistry student. She's a mother, she's non-traditional, but she wanted to do something with astronomy last summer. So I had her use, the telescopes, the Brown telescopes, to monitor cataclysmic variables. This is the moment after she made the discovery. She was pretty down, and she was thinking, it's like,
Okay, it's time to bring your conversations in your zone together.
she found a super.
Everyone, if you want to roll your little wheelie chair to the center of your
She
zone.
wanted to come and do it. So yes. So
Hello, everyone. Just a second. Pause for just a moment. Bring your rolly chairs to the center of your zone and everyone talk as a group. Continue your conversations, and then one person will report out in 5 minutes. Okay, guys, let's get moving in your zone.
Go for it. I drew some squiggles.
So our table talks about the fact that workforce students would need to know what careers are open to them in astronomy. That students come in and they become biology majors because they know biology leads to health fields, right? Pre-med or pre-health or whatever. But they don't necessarily know what astronomy is other than astronomer. And depending on who the astronomers are that they know, if anyone, that might have a compelling pathway to them. So at an earlier age, there needs to be more explicit communication about career pathways. Same in physics.
I just love this series that it's not astronomy specific, but it's surprisingly fun. It's NASA TV on the internet. I use it a lot in my athlete. It shows what kind of states can do. Like it's what's that? A plant biologist. It's a dive instructor who started working for NASA. It shows exercise physiologists and all of these. A person who sews. So I mean, these aren't necessarily astronomers, but astronomy is a bigger umbrella than we. As you so rightly pointed out, um, all of there's a little astronomy and we talk about everything.
We need to expand our thoughts. To us, thinking about always being isn't just special. It's what all how helps what overall
One of the things that we emphasize astronomy in that sense, the interest level should be a credit towards if somebody then decides to switch paths because it's usually for so they're inspired by astronomy to become astronomer, then they should be that should be credit towards their degree as an incentive. Because right now it's not, and I think one of the and in that sense, we need we can train also not journalism or education or other places. The science, if they become scientifically literate, they go on to promote that. So that's like very important point of view. Yeah, important point. And we could have specific activities that involve scientific literacy. I actually have one of those activities on a discussion board. So it's like for participation credit, and it's a asynchronous online class, so it goes alongside anyway. But with large data science, there's other activities where they one thing and they learn okay, this is how real scientists work with real data, and then
other scientists, other STEM people, other non-STEM people.
Okay. Thank you. I hate to disturb the conversations, but your time's up. Choose your person who's going to share out from your big zone. All right, we're ready. Thanks, Erica.
Okay, so we had some notes. One of our big things was we were thinking about a kind of one of our people talked about quality teaching is really important, especially at the intro level. And so that's how you can kind of get some like more scientific literacy. And then kind of a question that one of our people also talked about that they put at the beginning of their class and like send it all the way through is how do you know what you know? So what evidence do you need in order to know what you know? What sources kind of help with that? Learning by doing, all these kinds of things. We were also talking about how astronomy does better than some other subfields in getting people of maybe underrepresented folks in. We also talked about how, like, does Astro add something that other classes don't, like other STEM-focused classes don't? So, like, warm fuzzies, it's easier, that kind of stuff. Cool.
Thank you. All right, we're going down to Zone B.
Okay, so we talked about a couple things that are important, I think, not just for astronomy, but in general, we can use, for astronomy, we can use it as a hook. It is something that brings people together. A lot of us talked about our eclipse experiences, but it's a hook with applicable skills. So if you have a student who's worked on one of these projects and has a published paper and they're interviewing at an engineering firm, for example, they're like, what's this thing with stars? So it can really bring people kind of further wherever they go. Something we talked about was instructor modeling of that scientific literacy in the classroom, in the lessons, actually interrogating the history of how something happened, which we can do with a lot of examples. And one of those examples that was brought up was Pluto, and how science, the debate over the classification of Pluto, which I don't think our students saw in real time anymore, but that is something that they know about, and that teaches them something about the way science is updated. That's most of it.
Okay, thank you. And Zone A?
So we took a slightly different tack than a lot of the other groups. We focused a lot on career readiness because that's something that a lot of our students are very concerned about. And I've had students say to me, oh, I cannot take astronomy because astronomy doesn't necessarily fit into my career goals. However, astronomy challenges students to think in different ways, to explore data analysis, to develop a lot of skills in data analysis. And also different ways of thinking that can be applicable to a lot of different fields. So really pointing out the interconnectedness of STEM and how astronomy can act as kind of a nexus of STEM, I think is a good way to get students into it, which would then increase broad science literacy. Because being pigeonholed in one science and not being able to think critically in various scientific ways is just as limiting as having little science background.
We took this all in completely different directions, even among our subgroups. And so I apologize in advance if I miss-summarize, but we talked a lot about engagement and discovering an identity in STEM belatedly because of kind of the impression from introductory courses that you just can't do it. In here we talked about scientific literacy in the context of a specific assignment in which students read newspaper or Google search on articles and understand the difference between the title and the content, where the title is often more flashy than the content ends up being. talking about, as many other groups did, astronomy as a kind of context in which scientific literacy can be improved, but also other disciplines, biology, chemistry, you could substitute any STEM word for astronomy, and that's.
Thank you.
We also looked at workforce as the primary driver for this one, and one of the things that tying back over to here, I mean, looking at standards that would prepare you in high school, but also when you get to college, something that Jonathan mentioned was the concept of two hats, and we've all been talking about our teacher hat today, but what about our advisor hat? When you're talking to these young kids and they're trying to figure out what to do with their lives, and we with our teacher hat, we want to make them all astronomy majors or physics majors. But if you put on your advisor hat, you say, most of the jobs are in computer science engineering. A lot of the internships are in defense. And so having this, the first conversation I have with my own majors is, have you taken a computer science class yet? Because you're gonna need that to be an astronomer anyway. But if you're good at that, that might be something that you minor in or double major in, because there's a lot of jobs there. There's an exponential almost increase in the number of astronomy majors in the country. If you look at the AIP numbers, they are not all going to become astronomers. We need to be honest with our students and say that you should consider the workforce.
Thank you. All right, who's speaking for Zone F?
Thanks. So we had a pretty good discussion as well. And so I think probably the two key takeaways that we had was, one of which is that astronomy is a multidisciplinary field, and having a relatively broad background allows you to be able to question the analysis of others and hop between different fields. And that also gives you a really good opportunity to be able to lead, because you understand a little bit from a whole bunch of different fields. It also has a high propensity to have active engagement, which shows people that there's a wide variety of different hands-on skills that can be used, and it really broadens the idea of what it actually takes to do science. The example given here was it took about 500,000 people to put 12 people on the moon. In addition to that, having a background in math and being able to read diagrams help you be able to interpret things using data and make data-driven decisions, as opposed to just things that are based upon hunches. And there's a variety of other things that are listed here, but I'll actually just pop them off over to Rachel and cede my remaining 5 seconds.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. It was great to hear all those conversations and those responses. Let's do this again with question number 2. We got everyone, right? Yes. Okay. Thank you for all of those responses. Yeah. So is it more important to engender curiosity and change attitudes, or to teach a certain body of content, or develop scientific literacy? We just talked a lot about that scientific literacy. So let's talk in our table groups about this. Go. Yeah, so the panelists are going to wander and join your conversations, having thought about this for days.
Essentially,
I'm listening in. I'm a new role. Go ahead.
okay. Well, in this paper, what they were pointing out is that we are often mixing scientific literacy with scientific curiosity in this class. These are actually categories. Scientific curiosity is more an affect skill, right? That actually, when you encounter something that diverges from your expectations, you have to go out there and investigate. You can be extremely scientific literate and have no curiosity at all whatsoever, so that when you see a discrepancy, the chance leads you to look for more. So I would say that this commingling over here between scientific curiosity and scientific literacy actually has created a problem.
I would agree,
And that is
but
that
at the
you
same
have
time, I feel like in my
vaccine
experience, I have 2
conspiracies,
majors,
deniers. What
right?
they've done
And
is that they show co-opted the rhetoric.
we don't have that where we are.
Well, they in fact are not
Nobody
interested in sort of like,
cares about these
investigating
details
further,
that I
sort of like
teach
the
in my
urgency
astronomy
class.
class.
They
Topics
are really
physics,
seeking for that
yes,
confirmation.
because
They live in that
the statics professor is counting on me to have introduced certain things. And so thinking about this as not quite such a harsh either or. You know, I have so much more flexibility to go off on a tangent if it's hopefully a student-driven tangent and talk about the curiosity that is used and not worry that they give me the information I have to leave out for next semester and not worry about. So I think we do have to, it's nice that way, but.
I like the idea, like, my own kids or whoever, that they're learning astronomy, how the world works within our classroom. It's not a lot of people on the rest of it, things like that, telling us how things work.
I think the major problem here is that we all know the answer. Engagement, doing more, having more opportunities, is having all of these things. But then we also have to like sleep and eat food and like clean the litter box, you know, all of these things in our lives. And where our universities are all getting so austere, it's hard to do all of these things because we just don't have the people to do all of this engagement. But Joe Rogan has a huge platform and all the money and all the personnel to do research. God, I hate the word research now. I don't know what that is. I know a bad word.
I didn't know that, but
Well, people do research, and when they say that, they mean they do a Google search and look at the top three like blurbs that Google picks out and tells that research.
oh, okay, I see what you're saying now.
I think really interesting about comment about curiosity and literacy. The point is that like how to make practical point of view from curiosity to literacy. So that is the part I think is the engagement part of it. And then the second part of the question about content, thinking about topic content or the literacy side. My in class usually I let the student topic you cover. I always say to them, pick a topic and go over it, be interested in that and spend more time on that. Let them choose it and then show them more about the detailed aspect on certain part about how to arrive at the conclusion that we're looking at current time. I just think that's part the attitude part. I don't know how to we have curiosity but we may not have attitude. They will change attitude about it. And that is something that I never heard.
Did you want to say something before I talk?
This is what it feels like we're all saying.
Yeah. So I teach my students right the first day of class. I say, to me, content is not that important, although I will ask content in examinations. Like an example, I will teach you that.
Okay, you guys, let's bring it to the whole zone. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move. You guys want to bring it all together?
And then I give the example of the Hubble Space Telescope. How the congressman initially in the committee wanted to stop funding it, and the public was outraged. And then stop it.
Love the use of whiteboards.
Which is part of the curiosity. So yeah, we were looking at that's a very chill way of saying what we're looking at because we were looking at like all these two things, these two times that play into each other and what part we play in that. Did you come up with any description?
But it's kind of hard because it's not that they're on a scale. This is our orthogonal future. You can have very low level of scientific literacy. You can have really high level of scientific curiosity. You can also be extremely scientific literate and have no scientific curiosity at all, right? This exists in different planes.
You just have, oh, they're on different planes. You just put them on a scale.
No, that they are not on the scale.
They're orthogonal scales?
That they are orthogonal to each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like they're connected already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Exactly. Like, why does it?
I've been in the direction of instilling scientific curiosity. Right. So all of our models of education are basically before the internet, all this information was precious. You need to do information. If you have enough scientific curiosity, you will actually seek out that information yourself. The thing that we can make the most difference in the classroom would be to engender that scientific curiosity.
So why does being curious matter so much? Like, and are you a curious person? Do you think your students do that? Successful in what way? The achievement way? Successful.
Well, the achievement comes along the way because I want to answer those questions for your own satisfaction. And then
Okay, why don't you appoint someone, select someone who's going to speak to the whole room? All right, let's start over. Are you guys ready? Do you have someone? Group A, Zone A? I think Zone B is ready.
Okay, so basically we said, well, first of all, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but really the whole idea, like in a one-on-one, we're doing a one-on-one context here. Obviously, your main goal is to develop scientific literacy because it's the only time a lot of students, only science class they'll get or the last one they'll get, right? And of course, along the way, so we sort of ranked them in a way, we want to nurture curiosity. And 3, content is just a way to do this, right? Content is almost secondary in terms of like, it's not exactly you have to have this content or that content. You need content that matches your course goals, right? All the content has to support the course goals. And you can do that. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. People talk about using Pluto and things like that to talk, but they do it in the context of how science works, all right? So that's I'm out of time. I'll give you 8 seconds back. How's that?
Thank you. All right, Zone A.
Okay, So we had some fun language to describe curiosity and content language, or sorry, content knowledge. We thought of them as being scaled on orthogonal planes. How cool is that? So Elise is going to hold up a board that she and her group made where curiosity and literacy are in red and engagement leads to one and attitude leads to the other. So we thought that these two concepts are connected. They're like a package. You can use them as a tool to inspire. We had a little conundrum over what we meant by curiosity, and is there good and bad curiosity, like curiosity to know if you got the right answer, or curiosity to just want to do lifelong learning, which can lead to happiness overall, and it can also lead to achievement on a test.
Zone next. C, who's talking? Awesome.
I don't remember running for this. So a couple of us had the same idea where it's like that snake that eats its own tail, kind of feeds itself. The engagement leads to curiosity, which leads to literacy, which leads to curiosity, which leads to engagement, which the thing. And that A gets to B. And that also you had to utilize things that are going on around you. So like the eclipse was a really great engagement moment for a lot of us across the Midwest and in Texas. So that was a really good way of doing that. And then on top of that, part of us was concerned about the engagement from basically from birth. They're not going to come into your classroom and engage with the material and care about what they're learning or even believe it if you're not engaging with the public to begin with. So as teachers, I know it's over. But as teachers, you have to engage them. It's like the Oscars or something, but you have to engage them and then you'll be able to have them in your classroom and talk
Thank
with
you.
them.
And I
don't
have a
think can talk-
second.
We went to so many different directions. It was hard to talk in 1 minute.
Thank you, though. You did a lovely job. Who's? Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
So one of the first things that we talked about, which I think another group talked about as well, was who is our audience here when we're thinking about curiosity versus content. And if you're talking to non-majors, then yes, we do need that curiosity so that they can know what kind of questions to ask in the future. And if you're thinking about majors, then yes, they need to have that context and they need to have the content as well, because they need that little pyramid, which I don't have anymore, but they need those legs to stand on so that they can go further, they can further their knowledge, they can go into the workforce, whichever, is it STEM workforce and different kinds of STEM, but they need that content to stand on. And another thing is, what is content, which again we talked about at length yesterday, but one of the things is vocabulary. For non-majors specifically, they need to know, one, are they asking the right questions? Are they asking questions which actually make sense? When you're talking about aliens, for instance, something I was talking about in the car ride, is it political aliens? Is it aliens of different planets? So that is one of the questions, and that's the question.
Thank you, everyone, for your concise answers. Who's speaking?
So it appears that our group kind of agreed with basically many of the things that were said in other ones. So I hate going last 2 times in a row, but we're not last. But so we basically agreed that there has to be some kind of a cyclical relationship between building curiosity and then teaching content to go towards scientific literacy. And we believe that there's also some level of inspiration that needs to be achieved between the two of them, right? You can't have them in isolation. It's not an either or, it's an and. And so if you can inspire people to be curious about something, they'll probably learn some portion of it. Perhaps it'll stick in their mind over the long run, maybe not. And the good thing is that if you can instill some kind of permanent knowledge in a person's mind, they can be protected against things that may not necessarily appear to us as an example. I'll give you one. It's like if you ask Google like how to get cheese to stick to pizza, it'll suggest that you use Elmer's glue. And obviously, that's not a good thing to do. So you need to have some intuition.
Thank you. And Zone D.
Is this thing on? Okay. So one of the first things we asked was, do we really have to pick one or the other? And then we dug in a bit more. So the idea of like who is our audience and what do they need also came up with us. I mean, do you have the luxury of having the curiosity and the attitudes lead, because you're not grading those typically, so you do need the content. um, Astronomy can be the vehicle about how we know what we can choose to teach and instill this literacy. I see arrows on our board as well about how these things can lead into each other. um, let's see. And not all students you have to change their attitudes. They come in with that curiosity. Some of our audiences don't. Yeah, I mean, they know we had a moon landing and all of that stuff. And if we can teach what we're passionate about, that also instills that curiosity. The opposite happens if you teach what you're bored with.
Okay. We all went, yes? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful. Let's go on to the next question. Maybe I can win question numbers. How do you create lasting learning in astronomy? So basically, how do we do what we're trying to do? And go.
Up here now.
Okay, let's go ahead and move to our zones. Let's go share with the rest of the team.
These are probably more in the Astro 101 context. You'll remember. Might be the thing that we focus on creating that maximum. That's definitely an important. wellness course. They're all they're thinking about is how can we make it safe to fail.
Okay, let's go ahead and make sure you've chosen someone in your group to speak first. I'm going to zone E. All right, and I know it's really hard to share. I'm walking around listening to these really great conversations, and it's hard to encapsulate that in 1 minute, but you guys are doing a great job. Thanks.
Yeah, so we kind of focused on, trying to think about like why you remember things, and you really remember things. You don't really remember things that somebody just told you in lecture. You remember things that you did and engaged with. So basically, just kind of having activities where there's, creative experiences, autonomy, going to eclipses, and things that where you can kind of have a story, that goes through that. Yeah, so just do it. Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, so like that basically that was kind of our thing. Was just just kind of through this experiential learning and having them kind of figure it out for themselves is the best way to have them retain that knowledge.
Thank you. All right, zone F.
So we talked a lot about the importance of participating and creating and doing something. So if you are doing telescopes, to share the images or say, I took this, not just I looked through the telescope, but here's the image that I took, or participating in research opportunities or double star research, and everyone can create an article and be a published scientist without being too difficult, but creating opportunities for success or having fun along the way. And a lot of us talked about the picture of the day, things like that, because that's ongoing. They can do that for the rest of their life. So, and that creates, okay, what's going on in this picture? What's something to research? What's the vocabulary along with this? So making it accessible, using accessible technology, whether that be a high-tech telescope that everyone can get a picture of, or, that picture of the day.
Thank you. All right, zone D. Do you guys have a microphone still? Oh.
Is this on? It is. So we discussed the need to create experiences for students. Along the lines of like what happens with Opus and stuff, actually, or getting them plugged in with astronomy current events. We also said that it's very important. Oh goodness, I need to look at my notes here. To I'm so sorry. I'm really bad at this apparently.
It's okay.
Help me out. I'm wasting all of our time. Yeah.
So, like connecting evidence to using evidence to support what you know, and making connections to their lives, their experiences. What are they, what are they interested in and studying and pursuing outside of your class? And we know how big a net that cast. Let's see. What? Okay, I'm trying to read it too. Let's see, they may not remember the content, but they should, one goal we can have for them is that they know how to get information. They know how to pursue their questions, what paths to take. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So surprisingly, we talked about experiences, but some things that we brought in were including teaching others in doing that experience. In order to do that, you need to build a community of trust. We talked about, oh gosh, we talked about building into your assessment process places where they can get stuff wrong and learn from that. That's very important for students walking in thinking, oh my God, GPA. What else am I missing?
To that spiraling up to that people have incrementally that you get into that sweet spot where you're challenging people but not overwhelming them, that they can build, that you're providing that. And then what else did we say? But yeah, it was really a lot about experiences.
Thank you. And I'm thinking maybe take pictures of your boards to put on Discord.
We went just a little bit different direction, and we started with what is lasting learning. I mean, does lasting learning mean that they actually retain it to the next semester or a lifetime? What are we talking about? So we talked about some brain science and the curve of forgetting and memory itself and layering ideas. And one of the things that we talked about was talking about the repetition of a process. And so, like, for example, dealing with data and plotting, looking for trends, talk about Kepler, positions and times of the planets, look for trends. But then we can go much later on, you got colors and brightness of stars, you look for trends. And wow, what do we get out of that? The planetary motion laws and just understanding stellar evolution. And so helping students to think about how to approach questions and applying in lots of situations, whether it's their own family economics or things like that. And then the last thing is relating it to things they see every day, like the moon and stuff like that.
Okay, and you have a microphone.
Okay. Yeah, much like many other groups have said, experiences, but we use the word maybe events. Have some events, some experience they're going to remember. Total solar eclipse. If the students went to the total solar eclipse, or even if you did a partial eclipse or whatever, but you made some event, they're going to remember that. They're going to carry that with them. Multiple people talked about student presentations, making the students do presentations, formal presentations, in front of a couple hundred students at some event or something. Even if they're non-science majors, make them do that in a science setting, and they'll have ownership. So that ties into ownership, just like taking the pictures and stuff. It's ownership of all the PowerPoint slides they put together and they present, and that they're going to remember an event. They're going to remember some big thing they did and stuff like that. So we were very much about experiences, events, and their ownership in that.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we got everyone, right? Yeah. All right, so we're getting to the end of our time for this session. And so we're not going to go into this question, the next question. We only have about 3.5 minutes left, but we kind of addressed this, our authentic experiences. Well, we didn't really address this. Our authentic experiences or active engagement techniques more effective? And we're not going to address that question, but it's something to think about. But what everyone just was talking about in that last question was authentic experiences and engaging with the material in a authentic manner. So I think I want to get a sense as we're doing this conference and as a sort of the first time in this manner. We've had one session with this sharing and sharing and sharing. How is it going, thinking about yesterday? I would get like a thumbs up, thumbs down sort of thing on this. I see some thumbs up. Please feel free to say, thumbs up, it's good. Today compared to yesterday. Thumbs up, and I do see a couple thumbs downs-ish, but mostly thumbs up-ish. Okay, we really want to be responsive to what's best for this, and some sideways thumbs, thank you. So we want to be responsive to sort of the needs of our community here. And I think we are, with 3 minutes to spare, ready to sort of move on. Yes, Ken?
That is, we as astronomy teachers need to make it very clear when we start teaching astronomy
that we care about what we teach. Love what we do. That love will translate, at least to some of them. The other thing we need to make clear is that we care until that happens, you're engaging.
Right, I absolutely agree. And I know I love this stuff, and I think everyone here loves this stuff. All right, Dan, I think we're ready to move on to the next.